The sun had set on a quiet Tuesday evening in Burlington, Ontario, casting long shadows across the pavement of the Mandarin restaurant. It was April 29th, 2025, a night that felt unremarkable to the families enjoying the dinner buffet inside. But just beyond the glass, in the dim light of the parking lot, the calm of suburban life was about to be shattered by a singular, irreversible event. The silence was not broken by a chaotic exchange of noise, but rather by a sharp, solitary crack, a sound easily mistaken for a firecracker by the uninitiated yet unmistakable to those who understand the language of violence. In that fleeting moment, a complex existence was brought to a sudden, surgical end. The man at the center of this tragedy was 55-year-old Craig McKilkum, though if you had asked the residents of his quiet Oakville neighborhood, they would have given you a different name entirely. To them, he was Craig Brown. He was the friendly, unassuming figure next door, who meticulously tended to his lawn, drove his children to school, and kept a disciplined schedule at the local gym. He was a fixture of the community, blending seamlessly into the tapestry of middle-class routine. He frequented local diners, offered polite waves to passers-by, and projected the image of a self-employed family man with nothing to hide. However, this suburban tranquility was merely a well-crafted facade. Behind the picket fence persona lay a reality steeped in the shadowy depths of Ontario's organized underworld. Craig was not merely an enthusiast or a weekend rider. He was a fully patched member of the Hells Angels, an insider with deep-rooted connections across the criminal network. This duality was not a matter of chance, but a deliberate survival strategy. In the high-stakes environment of organized crime, the ability to hide in plain sight is often the difference between longevity and incarceration. Craig had mastered the art of camouflage, compartmentalizing his life so effectively that even his closest neighbors were left in disbelief when the news of his passing broke. Those who navigated the darker corridors of his life described a man of immense discipline. Maintaining two distinct identities requires a level of psychological rigor that few possess. One slip, one overlapping interaction, and the house of cards can tumble. Associates noted that Craig was methodical, avoiding unnecessary risks, and keeping his worlds strictly separated. This caution allowed him to operate for over a decade within the organization, while maintaining his liberty. Yet, the paradox of such a lifestyle is that the walls you build to protect yourself can eventually close in on you. The incident in the Mandarin parking lot was not a random act of street violence or a robbery gone wrong. The precision of the attack suggested a level of professionalism that chilled as investigators. It was swift, calculated, and left behind more questions than answers. As police taped off the scene, the illusion of Craig Brown, the quiet neighbor, evaporated, leaving only the complex legacy of Craig McKilkum, a man who walked the razor's edge between domestic normalcy and the unforgiving code of the underworld, right up until the moment that edge finally cut deep. To truly understand the mechanics of the trap sprung in Burlington, we must rewind the clock to a pivotal moment that nearly dismantled Craig's carefully constructed world years prior. While the bullet that ended his life was fired in 2025, the target on his back likely began to take shape during the fallout of a massive law enforcement initiative known as Project Hobart. In 2019, this sweeping investigation tore through Ontario, targeting a sophisticated network of illegal gaming operations and financial maneuvering. The scope was staggering: 30 individuals charged, millions in assets seized, and the exposure of a system where illicit funds were washed through what appeared to be legitimate business ventures. Craig was not merely a bystander swept up in the dragnet. Investigators placed him near the operational core. He faced a laundry list of serious accusations, including bookmaking and possession of restricted weaponry. But the most dangerous charge, the one that carried the weight of decades behind bars, was the allegation of committing offenses for the benefit of a criminal organization. This legal categorization is designed specifically to decapitate leadership structures within organized groups. For 3 agonizing years, Craig lived under the microscope, his every move scrutinized, his future hanging by a thread. The pressure on him, and by extension his associates, was immense. Then, in 2022, a legal twist occurred that was as shocking as it was controversial. All charges against Craig were suddenly stayed. He walked free, not because of a proven innocence, but due to a procedural technicality rooted in the judicial system's clock. The courts determined that the case had taken too long to reach trial, violating constitutional rights regarding timely justice. The complexity of Project Hobart meant the proceedings would have stretched well beyond the legal limit. Craig had survived the legal system, but his liberation came with a hidden, exorbitant cost. In the underworld, a high-profile legal victory can sometimes be more dangerous than a conviction. The investigation had stripped away his anonymity. He had been publicly identified as a key player, and in circles where information is currency, he was now a liability. There is always a lingering fear among criminal associates. What did the police learn? Who might be pressured to testify next time, even without cooperating? A person who has been the focus of such intense scrutiny is often viewed as a loose end. By late 2022, the cracks in his safety net were becoming undeniable. Law enforcement received credible intelligence, indicating that Craig was in immediate danger. The threats were not vague. They were specific and emanated from internal friction within the very circles he navigated. Following protocol, police issued a duty to warn, informing him directly that his life was at risk. Most people, upon hearing that professional contract killers might be hunting them, would vanish or drastically alter their routines. Craig did neither. Witnesses from that period describe a man who refused to flinch. He continued to frequent his usual haunts, maintained his public visibility, and seemingly brushed off the warnings as just another hazard of the trade. Was this a fatal case of denial, or a calculated display of strength? In his world, fear is often interpreted as weakness, and weakness invites predation. He may have believed he could negotiate his way out of the conflict, or perhaps he felt that changing his behavior would only accelerate the inevitable. Whatever his reasoning, his refusal to hide set him on a collision course with a patient and ruthless adversary who was simply waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. April 29, 2025, began with the mundane rhythm of a typical weekday. The timeline reconstructed by investigators offers a haunting glimpse into the final hours of a man who appeared dangerously unaware that the sand in his hourglass was running out. At 4:00 p.m. security cameras at a gas station in Oakville captured Craig filling the tank of his black SUV. The footage shows a man at ease. He bought a coffee, moved with a casual gait, and displayed none of the hypervigilance one would expect from someone living under a police warning. To the casual observer, he was just another commuter navigating the suburban sprawl. To those analyzing the footage later, his relaxed demeanor was a baffling contradiction to the peril surrounding him. However, as the afternoon transitioned into evening, the choreography of his movements shifted from domestic routine to something far more opaque. At approximately 6:30 p.m., his vehicle was spotted entering a secluded industrial park. This was not a random detour. Intelligence units had long flagged this specific area as a known congregation point for outlaw motorcycle clubs. Yet surveillance from that evening paints a puzzling picture. Craig remained in the area for roughly 20 minutes, but there was no evidence of a physical rendezvous. No other vehicles were seen pulling up alongside him. No handshakes were exchanged, and no visible business was conducted. Was he waiting for a contact who never showed? Was he receiving instructions via a channel that police could not monitor? Or was this strange interlude a test away for unseen observers to verify his location before the final act? When he pulled out of the industrial park, he left behind no digital breadcrumbs. His phone records showed no flurry of texts or calls to coordinate a meeting. For a man deeply entrenched in a world where paranoia is a virtue, his digital silence was deafening. He employed no counter-surveillance driving techniques, did not switch to a burner device, and seemingly made no effort to check if he was being trailed. The hour that followed is a black hole in the investigation. Between leaving the industrial sector and arriving at his final destination, Craig's movements are unaccounted for. But shortly after 8:00 p.m., his black SUV rolled into the parking lot of the Mandarin restaurant on Fairview Street. The venue was bustling with the Tuesday dinner crowd, yet Craig did not head toward the entrance to eat. Instead, he steered his vehicle toward the rear of the lot, backing into a space that sat ominously outside the primary field of view of the establishment's security cameras. This specific parking choice raises the most chilling question of the entire timeline. Did he choose this spot for privacy to conduct a meeting? Or was he directed there by someone he trusted? The location was a tactical nightmare, isolated, dimly lit, and offering limited escape routes. Witnesses later recalled seeing him exit his vehicle, appearing calm and purposeful. He did not look like a man fleeing for his life. He looked like a man arriving for an appointment. He stood by his open driver's door, exposed and waiting. He was exactly where someone wanted him to be, at the exact time they needed him there. The trap had been set with psychological precision, leveraging his confidence against him. In the quiet of that backlot, the stage was set for a confrontation that would leave no room for negotiation. Between 8:10 p.m. and 8:19 p.m., the atmosphere in the parking lot shifted perceptibly, noticed only by a few observant diners peering through the restaurant windows. 3 separate witnesses later recounted seeing a second figure emerging from the shadows to approach Craig's stationary SUV. The descriptions provided to law enforcement were frustratingly archetypal: a hooded silhouette, face angled downward, features swallowed by the darkness. There was no aggressive posturing, no raised voices, and no visible struggle. To a distant observer, it might have looked like a casual conversation between acquaintances. But at 8:21 p.m., the illusion of civility evaporated. A single sharp report, dry and flat like a firecracker, punctuated the night air. The assailant vanished as quickly as they had appeared. By the time patrons rushed outside, drawn by the unnatural noise, the scene was eerily still. An off-duty nurse dining at the restaurant attempted to render aid, but the outcome had been decided the moment the trigger was pulled. The response from Holton Regional Police was rapid, with the first cruiser arriving within 4 minutes. Yet the perpetrator had already dissolved into the suburban landscape. The forensic reality of the scene pointed to a chilling level of expertise. Investigators found no shell casings on the pavement, a detail that strongly suggests the use of a revolver, a weapon that retains its spent brass, eliminating the most common form of ballistic evidence left at crime scenes. The investigation quickly zeroed in on a ghost vehicle spotted in the vicinity, a newer model grey Honda Civic with dark-tinted windows and black alloy rims. This car became the investigation's white whale. It was seen prowling the perimeter before the incident and departing calmly afterward, yet it lacked distinguishing marks and has never been purely recovered. The driver of the Civic remains a cipher, a phantom operator who navigated the blind spots of the city's surveillance grid with practiced ease. The use of such a common vehicle was likely a strategic choice, allowing the suspect to blend into traffic without drawing a second glance. However, the greatest obstacle facing detectives was not the lack of physical evidence, but a formidable cultural barrier known as the Blue Wall of Silence. In the realm of outlaw motorcycle clubs, cooperation with law enforcement is viewed as a cardinal sin, often punishable by severe internal discipline. Despite Craig's public execution, his associates remained tight-lipped. Potential witnesses who understood the context of his final days chose silence over safety. Even family members, paralyzed by grief and the terrifying reality of the situation, found themselves navigating a minefield where speaking out could invite further tragedy. Today, the file on Craig McKilkum remains open but static. The theories regarding his demise are plentiful. Was it an internal cleaning of house for violating club protocol, a lingering vendetta from the Project Hobart days, or a business dispute that could only be resolved with finality? What remains certain is that Craig's attempt to walk the line between suburban lava and underworld operator proved to be an impossible balancing act. His story serves as a grim reminder that in certain circles, there is no statute of limitations on grievances, and some secrets are protected by a silence that is deafening.